thinking about our growing pains and aches and wondering if how persons of disabilities make it every day? Is digital transformation the enabler for a greater inclusion in society? Pause. Think about it with intentional thought and consider where we go from here. Stay tuned and hear what Nalini Bethel, Chairperson of the Commission of Persons of Disabilities, got to say about how persons of disabilities can reshape our national narrative and enhancing our quality of life.
Something to think about with Dale Happy Knowles. What we think, we become. What we radiate, we attract. What we imagine, we surely can achieve. Let's change the narrative, 242.
Welcome to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. This evening we're going to have a provocative conversation. Hopefully will tantalize your intellectual knowledge and also be able to encourage you and inspire you to want to do something to cause productive change in our society. And as I mentioned in the opening, we have the lovely Mrs. Nalini. I'm saying it backwards today for some reason. I shouldn't. Bethel, who's going to join us and walk us through this talk today. Welcome. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm awesome. Yes, and so we want to ask the question today, is digital transformation the enabler for persons of disabilities? And this is our 116th episode. So I feel blessed to have you on this platform and to be able to do whatever we can here at Something to Think About to lend assistance to raising the bar. And this is, I think you all are in your Disabilities Week, aren't you?
Yes, it's Disability Awareness Week is December 1st through the 9th.
Okay.
And we have the International Day for Persons with Disabilities as declared by the United Nations is on December the 3rd, was on the December the 3rd, sorry. And we did celebrate that with a church service.
Okay, awesome. Well, folks out there, remember that you can always send your comments, questions, and we will endeavor to answer those as we can. Make sure that they stay in line with what we're talking about so we could keep the flow. So today I had a couple of conversations with persons to work, and they seem to have a disconnect as to what is persons of disabilities. How would you define that and so forth?
Well, basically, a person with a disability can experience a number of barriers in society. Now, they may have some physical disabilities, like, for instance, mobility issues. They may be in a wheelchair or an amputee. Then you may have persons who experience blindness or visual impairments. Even if you wear a glass, your glasses, that means that you have some impairment with your vision. And then you have persons who are deaf and hard of hearing. You have the group that is neurodivergent, i.e. They may have autism or intellectual disabilities, developmental delays, and so on. So there are all kinds of different types of disabilities that are experienced by persons.
Yeah, and I found this particular one. I don't know if this will speaks clearly to what you're speaking. Why am I getting that on my screen?
Mm-hmm. Yep, it does. It does speak to it, and you have the symbolism
Mm-hmm.
that that is there as well, and
Yeah.
psychiatric disabilities as well, mental illness as well. That it basically you may experience barriers in the community that would affect your proper functioning because I mean, for example, you are in a wheelchair, but they don't provide any ramps to
Mm-hmm.
access a building, or they may not provide rails for persons to hold on to. And so it's actually the law that every building is accessible to a person with a disability, regardless of the type of disability.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I mean, not cool for them, but the explanation is very good. So when we look at this whole picture, then, and we move forward, we're talking about the issues with persons of disabilities, but we also want to highlight that we have to find solutions for these. And part of the solution, in my mind, is probably with people understanding. And so I grew up knowing about blind and deaf. But when we look at all of these other ones, how many of those other examples reside in the Bahamas? And like, do you have an idea as of what percentage of persons who are in the community
Well,
have the
yes,
different types of disabilities?
yeah. Well, we are awaiting the results of the latest census, but in the
Okay.
last census, there were some 10,138 persons with disabilities. Um, Across the board, there were, I would say, in the Bahamas, the community of the hard of hearing and those who experience blindness uh, at varying degrees, though they were by far the higher types of disability, as well as those with mobility issues.
Okay.
Um, you know, you can become a disabled person at any time, right?
Yep. Hmm.
At any age. You don't necessarily have to be born with a disability. You can have an accident, or you age. The elderly themselves, they experience a higher proportion of disability.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, I had throat, basic tongue cancer in the throat, and they gave me chemo, and they told me that I could expect my hearing to deteriorate, right? Because that's what the type of chemo that they had to give me does. So
Hmm.
far, so good that it's holding its own, but you never know what will
Absolutely,
happen, right? And
absolutely. So, we need to stand up for the rights of persons with disabilities in the
mm-hmm,
country. And, you know, they are equally, um, they equally have the right to access everything that those with disabilities do not access.
right,
So, I mean, that everybody who has access to education, healthcare. We have access to employment. These are all rights. Education is a primary one. We've also recently, last year, we ratified the International Labor Organization's vocational, um, the right is, I think it's clause 159.
okay,
Um, and it's we ratified that. The Bahamas ratified that, and basically saying that vocational rehabilitation and employment is a right under the labor laws now.
Right.
So you know, the act that governs what the National Commission does is the Persons with Disabilities Act of 2014, Equal Opportunities Act of 2014, and it basically outlines the rights of persons with disabilities in the Bahamas. And it is based on the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And that's the basis of that act. So we have signed on international levels to basically uphold and protect and promote those rights in the Bahamas.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what we need to be doing. We
Awesome.
need to equalize the playing field. We need to recognize and respect a person with a disability. It doesn't mean that they're useless.
Right.
They have a value. They bring an intrinsic value as a human being. So that is what we really need to focus on. You know, I always say, take the DIS off of disability,
Right.
and what are you left with?
The ability.
Ability.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Right.
disability, it's ability. So we have to try to recognize what a person can do and try to encourage them and make ways and means for them to do what they do.
Right. Yeah. And we want to get to that point today where we could probably speak to some of the things that could take the dis off the disability. So it could be ability. And so if you look at the question on the screen, we say, which was touching on what you were talking about just now, is the governance structure or protocol, whether from a social, the commission, advocacy bodies, etc. And what are the actual rights? Because it seems like in this country, we are always fighting for rights. You had the movements the other day where persons were saying with the gender issue, and there was always that fight, and you don't hear too much about persons of disabilities fight. And so, what is the structure in the country, and do they have a voice?
Absolutely, they have a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, within the Ministry of Social Services, the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities is a statutory body. And in that body, there is a secretariat as well that actually takes action on the items that the National Commission wishes to execute.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they're a wonderful team of professionals and are very dedicated and committed to the cause. Now, within that department now, we work also with all of the NGOs that actually are out there in the community serving people with disabilities for their own particular
Discipline.
disability. For
Mm-hmm.
instance, REACH is for the group on the autism spectrum.
Okay.
There's a Down Syndrome Association. There is Eyes Wide Open. There is Bacadas, which is an advocacy group for persons who are visually impaired and blind. There's a lot of them. We have a listing of about 20. Disabled People's Organization, that's another one that we serve. Abilities Unlimited, Bahamas Association for the Physically Disabled. So we work closely with them, with all the NGOs as well.
Mm-hmm.
And because they serve their particular community's needs.
Right.
And that's also very important. But we're the commission is like the overarching body on the rights of persons with disabilities, because we are governed by the act which speaks to those rights.
Okay.
And every facet of life that Bahamians enjoy, those with or without disabilities, that's what it's all about. It's about giving them access and improving the quality of life for them.
Yeah. And so when we look at then the commission, because you call, I guess, a subset of a whole suite of advocacy groups,
Right.
focus groups, etc. Is it that everything has to go through the commission as a government represented, or is it an independent body funded by government? How does it work?
Well, both. It's a mixture of two. Now,
Okay.
within the Department of Social Services, there's also the Disability Affairs Division, which concerns itself with the benefits and assistance that they would give to persons with disabilities. Right? We in the National Commission, we are concerned more with the rights of persons with disabilities to
Okay.
ensure that we all follow that law. We have within the commission, there are inspectors that inspect buildings to make sure that they are accessible to all. Many of the older buildings were not adherent to codes. The newer buildings are, because we now comply with the international codes for persons with disabilities. And the commission in itself is made up of people from the disability community. For instance, we have to have 5 NGOs represented. We have to have persons with disabilities on the commission.
Okay.
We have parent reps on the commission as well. And we have several ministries also represented: education, labor, we have health.
The police?
We don't have the police on the commission, but we do have a close relationship with them. We do liaise with them on a regular basis.
Excuse me. Yeah. I asked about the police because I saw one time when when I was in a store, how the interaction between a person with disabilities and the store owner employee, and the police was there and they didn't really intervene. So I was wondering if they were sensitive to what's happening.
Well, we have a job to do, and that's one of the things that the commission also does. We try to do sensitivity training, and we just recently had a workshop where there was police officers were represented, as well as the Defense Force and other organizations. We talked about sensitivity to persons with disabilities. We talked about the right way and the wrong way to address a person with a disability. First of all, when you look at a person with a disability, don't let the disability affect you. They're a person, they're a human being. Treat them with the same courtesies and the respect that you would give to anyone else.
Well, that's questionable too, because I mean, anybody else don't seem like people give them courtesy and respect no more. So maybe I don't know.
I mean, we just recently had the campaign on gender-based violence. Well, it's still
Right.
going on. 16 days of activism for against violence, and basically there's a disproportionate amount of women and children with disabilities that are affected by violence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that is also something that we need to actually try to curtail
Right.
in the Bahamas. We need to stop the violence.
Yep.
Really, these are human beings, you know, and we really need to take hold and stop it.
Right. Mm-hmm. So when we look at that whole scenario, then, and we talk about the commission, social services, etc. as a role. Corporate Bahamas, I didn't touch on that, but how was their interaction with the community?
Well, I know that several organizations do actually contribute quite heavily to the disabled community.
Mm-hmm.
And I can think of two right now. Rotary provides wheelchairs, for instance,
Okay.
and they have been involved in other projects they've supported. And then you have Alive. Alive is an extremely good corporate partner.
Mm-hmm.
Alive has sponsored the disabled, the community group, Chosen Ones,
Okay.
which kicked off last year's Junkanoo Parade.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Alive has participated in Special Olympics. So there are corporate citizens out there, and the National Commission is actually having a drive right now where we are seeking corporate entities to get more involved in the community because we need the help.
Right.
We need to provide more services for persons with disabilities. And we really one of the biggest projects we have is that post-school age facility. Is when you age out of the school
Right.
system,
Right.
there's nothing
Mm.
after you've after the age of 16. There's nothing for you to do. If you are able, if you have some skills, and you might be able to get a job of some sort. But on the whole, there needs to be vocational training,
Mm-hmm.
and there needs to be employment opportunities. Now, when you look at the act itself says that 1 in every 100 employees ought to be a person with a disability. So if an organization has 100 employees, one of them
Yeah.
has to be a person with a disability.
Right. So if we look at, well, I guess we could start with government and Atlantis. I think they're the two biggest employers in the country. And so last I heard, before any of the downsizing and whatever, Atlantis was somewhere around 8,000 or thereabouts. So they do they have, and then government? I mean, are we compliant with that law?
I know that Atlantis does have a few persons with disabilities employed.
Mm-hmm.
We have not actually inspected to see how many of them are persons with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
However, government itself has taken the initiative. I think Minister Pierre Glover Roll started the 52-week program,
Program. Okay.
and yes, and 50 of those who were taken on for training were persons with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And then Alive also took 20 persons with disabilities as employees
Right.
last year. We are
Okay.
also working with the Department of Labor. That is on their agenda to make more opportunities for employment for persons with
Mm-hmm.
disabilities.
Yeah. And so, as the question says, are we having free access to society, people of disabilities? You talk
They
about some
have
of the physical impairments, but what is everything else? And you talk about the lack of training. But if those things were in place, are the other access free without being encumbered?
um, in some aspects they have good access
Okay.
to opportunities, okay, in society. For instance, education is where we have achieved inclusion to the greater extent.
Mm-hmm.
There in education you have a lot of inclusive classrooms, schools that have special needs classrooms that um, would it be so the children who were in those classrooms would also be included in the general activities of the school and so on. Um, that is where we have achieved the most inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
We still lack inclusion in and access in many ways. The physical buildings that I mentioned earlier, but also the opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Accessibility is also, it's not just about ramps and the physical situation. It's also access to employment
Right.
opportunities, access to
Mm-hmm.
healthcare, access to every aspect of life in the Bahamas, social and cultural as
Right.
well.
Yeah.
So we have some way to go with regard to full access to everything that everybody else enjoys. We have a
Yeah.
ways to go.
And so it seems to me like a number of persons in the community will still have to be dependent on somebody for something if these basic access is not available. And so my question here would be is what is the attitude of society towards persons with disabilities? Do we see them as nothings or people who shouldn't be, or you know, sometimes we get a little beside ourselves and think we're better than somebody or whatever. What's the general feeling from the persons in the community as to how society looks at them?
Well, I have to say that things have changed a little bit in the
Mm-hmm.
Bahamas. Um, my son was diagnosed with autism about 32 years ago, and um, he'd be having tantrums. If I go to the food store, he'd be throwing himself on the floor,
Mm-hmm.
and people would look at us as if we didn't have any parenting skills,
Right.
and they would be extremely intolerant of the differences. I think that we've raised the awareness quite a bit. And I feel that there's a degree of tolerance and a degree of acceptance, and knowing that there is um, ongoing awareness raising, and by both the commission, the everybody who's involved in the community and the NGOs. We constantly out there pushing, and I think that it's helping. It's definitely helping to have a culture of acceptance and tolerance.
Right.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I do think, though, I think that the church could be more involved. The church could do more to encourage its members to reach out to persons with disabilities, to give a helping hand, to encourage them, and to take them out, include them in your activities, take them out socially. They're not supposed to be housebound. They're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be out there, and
Persons to be self-sustainable. Does this require funding? Because you mentioned autism, and I'm sure that that has to be expensive to support a program.
yes, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the whole everything needs funding. You know, even if a business has to change the angle of its ramp,
Mm-hmm.
that costs money, right? Everything
But,
needs
but
everything
I
in
meant for the actual person who has a disability. Yeah.
well, in
Would
order for us to provide the kinds of training that they need to create job opportunities, uh, all of that needs funding. One critical aspect of our society, well, it's actually two. One
mm-hmm.
is that the shelters in the time of crisis, in the time,
Okay.
say, hurricanes, um, there are no fully accessible shelters in the Bahamas, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's one that comes close, but it's not equipped fully.
Right.
Now, if you think about the statistics of the last census in 2010 that had about 6,000 persons with disabilities in New Providence alone,
Mm-hmm.
then there's no way that we could, if there's a crisis, that we could move these people out of harm's way. Okay, put them in shelter.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a priority for us. With climate change and everything else, we need to find a way of providing at least one shelter that could accommodate people in wheelchairs, people with intellectual disabilities. You know, that we need to be able to do that. The
Mm-hmm.
second thing is transportation. Transportation, you could find is something that we really need to work on.
That issue to help persons out there understand. Um, if you can't drive the bus or ride the bus, and you have to take a taxi or Bahama Uber or whatever it is, that
Ain't no Bahama.
itself, huh? That itself
Yeah,
could be very expensive, right?
exactly. That's the
And
point.
so that will
To go from
discriminate,
point A to point B is very difficult for a person. You know, you could be going to a medical appointment to go to the hospital and back. It
right?
costs a lot of money, or you got to rely on a friend or family member to take you. You know, it is difficult, and it doesn't provide that independence for a person with a disability.
Right. And so we've been talking a little bit about painting the picture as to what is the pain and what is the situation. I call it a pain. Pain for the persons with disabilities, because most people will walk right past persons with disabilities and don't even bat an eye, right? Because we're so much in society today about ourselves. We only like to see how many likes we get on Facebook or whatever the situation is. It's all moved to people-centered, personal-centered society versus community, like what we used to have, or village, as the old people used to call it. So when we look at that, what would be considered the top pains that is experienced for persons in the community, and what you think is necessary to alleviate that? And then we'll touch on to whether technology can help with any of those.
Well, I mean, training, education, training,
Okay.
vocational training, a conscious effort by corporate Bahamas to include a person with a disability in interviews, to not dismiss a person with a disability if they have the qualifications. They, just because of their disability, you shouldn't be. The law tells you that you're not supposed to discriminate against that person if they're qualified.
Right.
So it requires a change of attitude. Really, it requires looking at the person in front of you with who may have a disability, but that does not prevent them from functioning in society. And so I think opportunity, funding, and technology can help actually to alleviate the pain.
Right. And I think I read somewhere or saw it on YouTube or something, where some of the greatest geniuses that we have in our societies are persons with disabilities. Have you seen anything on that before?
Oh yes, I have. Stephen Hawking comes to mind.
Okay.
Christopher Reeve, who acquired a disability. Michael J. Fox. You know, a lot of persons. I mean, we have our own famous people too. We have. I can think of the current principal of the Salvation Army's Erin Gilmore School for the Blind,
Okay.
Mr. Cartwright. Mr. Cartwright is published. He's a published author. All right. He's very talented, but he does not allow his disability to define him.
Right.
And I find that kind of spirit in many persons. We have another person, Jerome Thompson. I think he's a commissioner on the commission. He represents civil society on the commission, and he has a fantastic mind. They all do. They all do. A person with a disability cannot be defined by their disability. It is, you have to look in their minds and recognize the talent that is there. And you also, in the realm of autism, you have very, very gifted persons who are called autistic savants.
Right.
And these savants actually, a savant like in that movie Rain Man, where he could remember the numbers. There's people like that everywhere. There's a young man in the UK who can memorize whole landscapes and draw them out. Streets and names. It's amazing. You have somebody like Dr. Temple Grandin, who is an author. She's a professor, and she has autism as well. So you can achieve if you're given the opportunity, and it's the opportunity that is required. The funding for that opportunity is also required.
Yeah. So basically, there's really no excuse, and there's actually corporate Bahamas is losing out on. They talk about a brain drain when we have brains here that we're not even tapping into. So
correct,
right, which is interesting.
It is correct.
And then when we look at that and we say that, okay, well, we're not tapping into that because the challenges of getting to work back home and stuff like that. But we went through COVID where everybody was working from home. So technology to me very easily can play a role in enabling the persons of disabilities to have access into society and be greater contributors
Mm-hmm.
to building our nation.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, we've been working with the Department of Digital Transformation, and you know, when you look at some of the websites
Mm-hmm.
that we ordinary citizens access for online services, they have now decided to make everything user friendly for anyone.
Right.
And they actually incorporated our registration form in my gateway so that the you can actually now register with the National Commission for Persons with
Mm-hmm.
Disabilities as a person with a disability, and you could they have accessible technology on their site now. Almost every browser now also has accessible mode. Apps have accessibility mode. So
Mm-hmm.
you have things like text to speech conversion.
Right.
So
I
a
use that.
blind person can hear what is on
Mm-hmm.
the screen, and you have closed captioning for persons with hearing difficulties who could
Right.
read, so they can actually see what's on the screen. So there are ways and means of uh, actually achieving that kind of equality.
Yes. And so when we look at those items, right, and digital transformation is always talking about how we could use these technologies to change the way we interact. Um, you mentioned a lot that is interacting to the actual digital space, but what about technology to be used to interact with each other or to interact with other members of society itself? Because I mean, when we look at these things, what one thing comes to mind is, which isn't necessarily a transformational issue, but more of an operational issue, is all of these things run off of data, and I think the persons of disabilities rely on data more so than anybody else. Um, in a normal scheme of things, not specialized persons, but to just do their things and make sure. Because, like, for instance, walking down the street, I almost fell down the other day because I wasn't paying attention, and there was a manhole or a little whatever drain thing, but a 2 inch deep thing that I stepped halfway into. And when my foot felt like it was not going to be on solid ground, obviously my reflexes kicked in. But if that was somebody who might have been of a disability or some normal person, because I don't consider myself normal from athleticism point of view, but uh, they probably would have fallen down. And that sidewalk was so small, it's possible you could have fallen into the road where cars was moving faster than they probably should have been. So,
Mm-hmm.
is there technologies that we could use to help persons, particularly impaired, visually impaired persons, to know where obstacles are? I've seen some stuff on, my friend's YouTube, so where people were doing things like that using
You
the
can have
their cell phone.
electronic white canes
Okay.
that are there that can read your environment for you, and that already exists. Um, you have, for instance, uh, the talking, the traffic lights,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff that basically adapts the environment for a person with a disability. You have um, uh, something that I know of called JAWS, which
Mm-hmm.
is job access with speech. It is a reader, a screen reader program that you can download onto your um, um, mobile phone, or
On
you can download
device.
onto
Mm-hmm.
your tablet, and it basically, you could train to do anything through that.
Right.
And we actually were donated 10 tablets by the Chinese embassy, which on which we put the software, and then we provided training for 10 young persons who were visually impaired, and who then received that training. So these are the kinds of tools you have. Yeah, I see where you have JAWS there.
Mm-hmm.
um, and websites these days are very accessible. Apps have accessible too, have
Mm-hmm.
accessible features. So yes, I mean, the answer is technology can definitely um, have a role in equalizing the playing field, but
Mm-hmm.
it also requires commitment as well
Right.
from everyone else to ensure that the obstacles and barriers are removed so that persons with disabilities can function as independently as they possibly can.
Right. And so those are some of the things, and we highlight here. The described video, to me, is one that I think helps a lot of people when they're looking at the TVs and stuff to understand. But
Hmm.
what technologies, if somebody was an inventor out there um, today, because we have a lot of creative children who just sitting around waiting for the opportunity to do something, and that's another group of society that is not included in our society in a big way to me, the innovative um, sector. But what would be some of the technologies from your experience and the challenges that we are having in the Bahamas, persons of disabilities is having, would you like to see be enabled or brought or even created?
Well, specifically to highlight any one thing, I mean, really, I think that we need to have government services more accessible for persons with disabilities. We need to be able to provide the transportation
Mm-hmm.
for them. And this could be by providing a booking platform for them in their mobile phones or their carers' mobile phones. We actually do have a feature in our app for that.
Okay.
We all, but you have to have the service provider on the other end. So again, that's an entrepreneurial
Right.
opportunity for somebody. And you know, there are lots and lots of technological tools and softwares out there um, that help with learning, the learning
Mm-hmm.
disabled. Okay.
Okay.
So there's the assistive and adaptive technologies that are out there. Um, they do exist. There's lots of them. We don't have them as readily available. I think that we need to have experts developed in these areas so that, especially for learning disabled
Mm-hmm.
persons, so that they can have access to these programs, softwares, apps that could really help them to learn and equalize the playing field, because that's what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
Having equal opportunities, and it's all about learning and the ability to have access to what's out there. There's a lot out there already.
Right, right. Well, I also always well, not always, but most of the time say that it's one thing to have equal access, but we want equitable access too, so that we could cause the persons who are disadvantaged to be put at the same tier as the person who has the advantage,
Hmm.
sort of thing. So we all could see over the fence, even though I was only 4'2", going into grade 10. But that's a different animal altogether there. So when we look at this, and then we have these new tools like in the AI, the artificial intelligence, and the like, it's visual reality and the like. Are they being used to help people navigate or learn or the like in the Bahamas?
Well, I don't know. That would be
Mm-hmm.
the honest answer to what extent AI tools are being used to help persons with disabilities. Um, but I know they exist, and I know that, for instance, um, you could teach a person um, how to navigate their homes, for
Right.
instance,
Right. Mm-hmm.
through AI. And
Right.
and we're doing it now with Alexa and whatever. But it's actually uh, possible, and we have to get there. We have to get there. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that digital transformation of the Bahamas will include all of that.
Yeah. We have to make it happen, and
Hmm.
we can't move forward and leave the persons of disabilities by the side, to catch up on their
No, we
own.
can't. No,
Right.
we can't. It's you're actually discriminating against them if you leave them behind.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And
And
sometimes I think people aren't really doing that. They just don't know they exist in that light. Right. So um, I give an example. We had I forgot her name right now, doctor, and we were talking about the show was called Acting Out. Is acting out really acting out, or is it a mental challenge? But you also have people who have physical and disabilities challenges, which is another spoke to put in the wheel of confusion. And so when the person out there in the street sees somebody, I think a lot of time they don't know which is it is. The person has a mental challenge, the person has a disability, or they just acting the fool, as we call it in the Bahamas, right? And I think some of that is part of the sensitivity training that we need to do across the board. And I think we could use these technologies to help with that in a big way and so forward. Now, I've been asking you a lot of questions, but we've had some friends over here who've been bold enough to put their names forward and say, hi, I'm Sherry Fountain, Gina Mansfield up there in Canada, and actually Val McInnes also in Canada. I think you know all of them persons there. And I don't know why this plane want to fly over right now, but the when we look at all these things, what haven't we covered that you would like to have a couple of minutes to address us on? Do you hear me? Hello? Am I gone?
are you talking to
To you.
the other people on the show?
No, no, to you, to you. What,
To
what,
me? Oh,
what we haven't addressed that you would want? Yeah, they're always welcome to it, and they listen. They're not shy. When they're ready, they can bombard you with questions, and when they're not, they just sit back and listen. Right. So, but what would you like to say that I didn't cover, or that you would want to be said?
I would like for us to really live out being your brother's keeper. in the Bahamas. I'd really like to see us embracing and accepting a person with a disability, encouraging them, and to be more tolerant. I would like for corporate Bahamas to look at a person with a disability as a possible employee, and don't allow the disability to prejudice them in any way. And, I would really like to see us all treated with the greatest respect for each other, everybody across the board. And, tolerance is the key, acceptance is the key. So we work towards that kind of society, an inclusive society that tolerates differences.
Yeah, awesome. And I always say, people, you never know what could happen. I don't wish it on anybody, but somebody might sideswipe your car or whatever. It could be anything. It could cause us all to be disabled or have a disability. It doesn't, like you mentioned, have to come from birth. I mean, I might have about 6 from birth, but they are all hidden. Nobody sees them, and so forth. Well, Nanita, I would like to thank you for taking the time to come on the show and share this information with us so that we can help try change the narrative. And that's the whole goal of this show. We want to put things out in the public space that people don't get to hear about on the traditional radio spaces and the byways and so forth, halls. And so that we could expand our minds here in the Bahamas and then grow from strength to strength so that we could maybe find more opportunities for solutions that can cause us all to create greater political, economical, and social economies. And so we love that you took the time, shared with us. You didn't shy away from anything, which was good, and so forth.
I want to say thank you for inviting me. It was really an interesting conversation. And I hope that the people who are on board listening found it equally interesting. And I look forward to a bright future for persons with disabilities in the Bahamas.
Yes, awesome. And folks, we know we can always share the show. I don't take them down. They're up there for educational purposes and the like. And so hit the like button and make sure share them. So thank you kindly, Nalini, and I will be sure to be in touch with you shortly and so forth. Welcome. So folks, you've been watching Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles, and we love that you stayed on to the end, and we hope that you found value in this show. We talked about a number of good things here. We want you to understand when you see somebody walking down the street or being helped or the like, whatever their disability is, that we're able to move in strength and have a different attitude towards them and maybe find a way to help. Because the more people we help, the better we will be as a society and be able to grow from strength to strength and strength. And as we talk about with the ICTs, there's all of these different goodies that we love to do, that we could use to come creative in our way. And why is that come back up? But yeah, so one we want you to do is to just be safe, have fun, don't do anything out the way that you can't reverse, and then we'll be back with you next week, same time, same bad channel.
Enjoyed the show? Then subscribe to us for more educational and inspirational content. Ring the bell so you never miss a show. Let's change the narrative 242